The warehouse. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook, nestled under the cover of night, a chilling tale unfolded. It was a typical evening, and Jessica had embarked on her routine DoorDash deliveries. She loved the extra income it provided, helping her and her husband, Mark, make ends meet. Mark sat in their cozy living room, watching the news and waiting for Jessica to return. He knew her deliveries often took her to unfamiliar parts of town, but tonight, as the hours passed, his unease grew. It had been almost 2 hours since she left for her last delivery, and her phone had gone silent. Unable to bear the silence any longer, Mark decided to call her, but her phone rang and rang with no answer. Panic gnawed at him as he dialed the number again and again, only to be met with the same eerie silence. Finally, he decided to check the DoorDash app to see if her location had updated. To his surprise, it showed her last known location as a desolate street on the outskirts of town. There was no reason for her to be there. It was a place neither of them had ever been before. With a heavy heart, Mark grabbed his coat and car keys, determined to find his missing wife. The night was cool, and a dense fog had rolled in, shrouding the neighborhood in an eerie haze. As he drove towards the location on the app, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The GPS led him to a dilapidated building, an old abandoned warehouse that loomed like a monolith in the fog. It was the kind of place that sent a shiver down one's spine, even in the daylight, and now, under the cover of darkness, it seemed positively menacing. Mark parked his car and stepped out, his heart pounding in his chest. He called out for Jessica, his voice quivering in the silence. There was no response, only the distant hum of the city. Summoning all his courage, Mark ventured inside the warehouse, his footsteps echoing eerily in the cavernous space. It was filled with rows of dusty crates, broken machinery, and the remnants of a forgotten era. He called out again, desperation lacing his voice. And then, he saw a flicker of movement in the shadows, something grotesque and otherworldly. His heart skipped a beat as he realized he wasn't alone in the warehouse. It was a figure, hunched and twisted, moving with an unnatural grace. "Jessica?" Mark called out, but the figure did not respond. Instead, it moved closer, its silhouette growing clearer in the dim light. Panic surged through Mark as he turned to leave, but the exit door had vanished, leaving only a solid wall. He was trapped. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone to call the police, but the signal was weak, and the call wouldn't connect. As he stared at the figure in the darkness, dread washed over him. It wasn't Jessica. It was something else, something that didn't belong in this world. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, malevolent light as it approached. Mark's mind raced, his fear threatening to consume him. He backed away, trying to find another way out, but the warehouse seemed to shift and warp around him like a nightmare come to life. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the nightmare ended. The warehouse returned to its desolate state, the figure disappearing into the shadows. The exit door reappeared, and Mark stumbled out into the foggy night, gasping for breath. He rushed back home, his mind reeling from the terror he had witnessed. He called the police, but they found no trace of Jessica or the warehouse. It was as if the entire ordeal had been a horrific dream. Weeks turned into months, and Mark was haunted by the memories of that night. He searched tirelessly for any clue that might lead him to his missing wife, but all he found were dead ends and unanswered questions. As time passed, Mark became a recluse, convinced that the warehouse and the malevolent figure were still out there, waiting for their next victim. He never gave up hope of finding Jessica, but the truth of what had happened that night remained a mystery. The story of Jessica's disappearance became a local legend, a chilling tale told in hushed whispers. Some believed it was the work of supernatural forces, while others dismissed it as a hoax. But for Mark, it was a nightmare that would never end, a nightmare that had taken his wife and left him forever changed. And so, the mystery of the missing wife, while delivering DoorDash, remained unsolved, a haunting enigma that lingered in the hearts and minds of those who heard the story. Mark continued to search for answers, driven by a love that refused to die and a fear that refused to be forgotten.